Cheers. Salutations. We're about to boot up and suit up and go to war. But not any kind of war. The Second Punic War against Rome's greatest enemy. Hannibal, the Danimal, the animal. That's right. We're talking about Hannibal. The most vile creature. Hold on. Greetings, true Romans. The hour is late. The Republic needs us. Now more than ever, we must boot up and suit up. Rally yourselves. Dark tides are upon us, and we face off against Rome's true enemy. Hannibal, the Danimal, the animal. The cannibal. Stop. I gotta tell him. Shush. Anyways, this is from History March. By the way, today is March 15th, the Ides of March, where one Julius Caesar died. R.I.P. So, in his honor, we go to war against Hannibal. Boot up and suit up. And if this is the kind of content you like, type in the comment section below, and please support the original content creator. It's the right thing to do. It's one thing to do, and I better see all of you do it. Do it now. Now. The result of the war in Sicily had not broken the spirit of that commander. He regarded himself the unconquered. Ooh.
After General Hasdrubal the Fair was assassinated by a Celtic slave, 26-year-old Hannibal was elected as the new Carthaginian commander. The young general immediately made plans to invade Rome, but he couldn't begin the campaign before strengthening Carthage's control over the Iberian Peninsula. So Hannibal went to work. He launched two highly successful campaigns in 221 and 220 BC, extending Carthaginian influence beyond the Tagus River. But while on the return route to New Carthage, Hannibal was taken by surprise by a coalition of Iberian tribes. Led by the Carpetani tribe, the Iberians assembled a large army. They blocked Hannibal's path and fortified their position against...
Houston, we have blockage. These barbarians, they don't know how to fight. Dude, take it easy. Obviously, I got to control my Roman council here. He's a little bit upset about Hannibal for many reasons. He hasn't quite told me just yet, though.
The Tagus River, then waited for the Carthaginian general to attack. Here, Hannibal showed his military genius for the first time. Instead of attacking the Iberians head-on, he erected his own fortified camp and waited. By day's end, his scouts found a river crossing to the southeast. During the wee hours of the night, Hannibal ordered a small contingent to stay in the camp and keep all campfires burning, creating the illusion that the whole Carthaginian army was still encamped. Meanwhile, he led his army on a swift flanking maneuver further up the river. By sunrise the next day, Hannibal was behind the Iberian position, feigning retreat towards New Carthage. Thinking that the Carthaginians were retreating, the Iberians rushed to intercept them. But once they were midstream, Hannibal sprung his trap and unleashed his cavalry.
That's a clever tactic, man. That is incredible.
Iberian infantrymen, chest deep in the fast-flowing river, couldn't offer much resistance and were cut down with ease by the Carthaginian cavalry charge. Those who managed to cross were trampled by the elephants. By now, the Iberian army lost all cohesion, and the mass of tribal warriors started fleeing. Hannibal ordered his army to pursue them across the river, completely routing the enemy.
Well, they got smacked. If he starts saying anything more positive about Hannibal, he's gonna get a stabbing.
On the Tagus River, Hannibal had his first major victory. But Rome took notice. Wanting to stop Hannibal's expansion, the Romans made their presence felt. Already allied with the wealthy and powerful city of Saguntum, Rome declared it their protectorate, an act that Hannibal perceived as a violation of the treaty signed by the two great powers in 225 BC, which divided the Iberian Peninsula along the Ebro River into Carthaginian and Roman spheres of influence. A sworn enemy of Rome, it didn't take long before Hannibal acted. He marched on Saguntum and besieged the city. In 219 BC, the Carthaginian army reached the outskirts of Saguntum. The city was heavily fortified, situated atop steep slopes and cliffs high above the surrounding plain. Saguntines requested aid from Rome, but the Romans were busy fighting the Illyrians. Nevertheless, with provisions stockpiled, Saguntum was prepared. Besieging it would not be easy.
No, it shouldn't be.
Hannibal installed a blockade around the entire city and placed most of his forces at the western end. Saguntines stubbornly kept pushing every Carthaginian assault back, but the siege went on for months.
Come on!
Many assaults gradually wore down portions of the wall. Eventually, the defenders had to abandon their outer defenses and form up behind the inner wall. Slowly and relentlessly, Hannibal's army made progress. And after 8 brutal months, the Saguntines made their last stand at the citadel. Soon after, the city fell. Inhabitants that survived the siege were either killed or sold into slavery.
Hey, where was Rome?
After the fall of Saguntum, Rome demanded justice for what they perceived was the violation of the treaty, and, claiming that Saguntum was in the Roman sphere of influence according to the treaty, they asked Carthage to hand over Hannibal to Rome so he can be punished. But the Carthaginian Senate stood by their general, and by the end of the year, the Second Punic War began. Hannibal wintered in New Carthage, preparing for the upcoming campaign. He placed his brother Hasdrubal in charge of Iberia, with
his least successful brother. Oof, that was rough.
15,000 troops and 21 elephants, along with a fleet of ships to protect the coastline. To break possible tribal allegiances, around 15,000 Iberian infantry were swapped for 15,000 African infantry, who were more reliable, sending the Iberians to Carthage and Libya to bolster defenses against a possible Roman landing. And in the spring of 218 BC, with the full support from the Senate, Hannibal marched out of New Carthage with 54,000 infantry and 8,000 cavalry, dividing his army into 3 columns. But beyond the Ebro, tribes allied to Rome were hostile to the Carthaginians, and it took Hannibal about 2 months to pacify the region.
Wow.
He placed around 10,000 troops under the command of Hanno, ordering him to establish a line of defense on the Ebro against possible incursions into Carthaginian territory. With 38,000 infantry, 7,000 cavalry, and 37 elephants left at his disposal, Hannibal crossed the mountains and encamped on the other side of the Pyrenees. Meanwhile, the Romans divided their forces. Their plan was to send Consul Publius Cornelius Scipio to intercept Hannibal in Iberia. Simultaneously, Consul Tiberius Sempronius Longus sailed to Sicily, with the intent of attacking Carthage itself if Scipio managed to stop Hannibal's advance. Additional Roman forces were left to guard the recently conquered Gallic lands in the Po Valley, a region the Romans called Cisalpine Gaul.
How dare the Gauls stay there?
Back at the foot of the Pyrenees Mountains, Hannibal laid the groundwork for the invasion. Rather than fighting his way towards Rome, he did everything to avoid conflict with the Gallic tribes, mostly paying them for free passage through their territory, promising that his only interest is to fight Rome. Moreover, Carthaginian messengers returning from the Po Valley assured Hannibal that the Gallic tribes there would welcome him, and that they had already began hostilities against Rome in anticipation
Traitors, all of them.
of his arrival. This was welcome news for Hannibal, because he knew the Po Valley could provide more manpower and act as a staging point for operations into Roman territory. As Hannibal approached the River Rhone, Scipio's army disembarked at Massalia to resupply, while on their way to Iberia. The Roman general knew that Hannibal crossed the Pyrenees, but he wrongly estimated that the Carthaginian general was still far from the Rhone. In truth, Hannibal's army was only 4 days' march away from Massalia. Hannibal rested his army for 3 days in hostile territory and began preparations to cross the Rhone. With the Roman army just 4 days away, Hannibal wanted to avoid a set-piece battle with the Gauls, eager to press on towards the Italian peninsula as soon as possible. But on the opposite riverbank, encamped was the army of the Cavaras tribe, a Roman ally. They gathered all their boats and built a barrier on the riverbank, in preparation to contest the Carthaginian crossing. But Hannibal devised a cunning plan. On the third night, under the cover of darkness, he sent a flanking detachment under the command of Hanno, son of Bomilcar, some 40 kilometers, 25 miles, north. Hanno crossed the river and rested his troops for 1 day. On the second night after leaving the Carthaginian camp, Hanno's detachment again moved during the night, eventually deploying behind the Cavaras camp at dawn. The trap was set. Early next morning, Hanno used smoke to signal Hannibal to start crossing the Rhone. As the Carthaginian vessels were lowered into the massive river, Cavaras' army formed a line on the opposite riverbank. Hannibal was one of the first to cross, to the roars and cheers from his men on the western bank.
Wow.
As the Carthaginians
Oh, Hannibal, my Hannibal. No, Hannibal, the animal, the cannibal, the animal.
started disembarking on the eastern riverbank, Hanno sent a part of his force to loot and destroy the Cavaras' camp, while he personally led the charge against the Gauls near the river. The Cavaras were stunned by the flanking maneuver, and they began fleeing the field in panic, unable to cope with Hannibal's perfectly synchronized attacks.
I heard that Wilhelm scream.
With the Gauls scattered, the battle was soon over, and the Carthaginians hastily proceeded to cross the river. Most of Hannibal's troops crossed the Rhone by the end of the day, while it took another day to get the elephants across the river. While the Carthaginian army gathered on the eastern bank, friendly Gallic messengers from the tribes in the Po Valley arrived, warning Hannibal that a Roman fleet is anchored nearby. Hannibal sent his scouts to locate Scipio's army, and, incredibly, not long after, his Numidian scouts stumbled into a Roman Gallic scouting party. Both generals now knew of each other's whereabouts. Scipio quickly moved north to confront Hannibal, but by the time the Romans reached the crossing point a few days later, only an empty Carthaginian camp was left behind. Hannibal had no time to waste. He had to reach the Alps before the winter. But trouble was brewing in Iberia. Scipio placed his brother, Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio Calvus, in charge of leading the army into Iberia, while he headed back to the Po Valley to assume command of Roman troops there and prepare for the Carthaginian invasion. Scipio Calvus, now in charge of the invasion force, disembarked at Emporiae. The Greek trading cities and the Iberian tribes in the region welcomed the Romans. But even prior to the arrival of Roman troops, the Carthaginians began to lose control over the conquered region, as Hanno's force wasn't large enough to conduct offensive operations. What's worse, Hanno only learned about the Roman arrival when Scipio Calvus was well on his way towards the Ebro River. He sent word to Hasdrubal, who began marching north with 8,000 infantry and 1,000 cavalry. But instead of waiting for Hasdrubal, Hanno marched out with 10,000 troops to meet the 20,000-strong Roman army. Scipio Calvus easily crushed the Carthaginians, killing 6,000 and capturing 2,000 troops, along with Hanno himself. Once Hasdrubal arrived, he didn't have enough troops to meet the Romans in battle, so he launched fast-moving raids along the coast. Carthaginian raiders killed many Roman sailors as they were foraging, reducing the effectiveness of the Roman fleet by half. Nevertheless, Rome now had full control over Iberia north of the Ebro River, a serious blow to the Carthaginian war effort. Moreover, northern Iberia would become a base of operations for Roman incursions into Carthaginian territory south of the Ebro River.
All right, we're going to pause here because there's a lot of parts to this. So, what have we learned here? First of all, Hannibal the Animal is going to be making a serious cross amongst the Alps into Italy. The early days of the Roman Republic. Hannibal is crossing the Alps, but will his journey be safe, or will his journey run into troubles? What lies in store for the Roman soldiers of the Republic? Will Rome somehow succeed in this Second Punic War? Well, type your thoughts in the comment section below, because we're joining this campaign, so boot up and suit up. We face off against Rome's greatest enemy, Hannibal the Animal. Something you want to say? There are some parts of this series that I don't look forward to. That's all right, buddy. He's a sensitive soul.